Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode this week with Ryan Brook. Hi Ryan, welcome back.
Hi Vasco, can't wait for this one.
I'm sure you have a great story to tell us. Of course, we're talking about change today, as it is Wednesday, the Leading Change episode. So we want to explore change for Scrum Masters, or from the Scrum Master role perspective, because of course that's something we deal with every single day. So Ryan, tell us that story of a change process you were involved with, and take some time to detail and list out the steps, the tools, the techniques, the approaches you learned back then that you still apply today.
So the situation was about 2 years ago, and I was a Scrum Master on a single team. But the organization had about 6 Scrum teams, and they wanted to scale. So they had decided, and notice I'm saying the management had decided they want to use the Large Scale Framework. They wanted to use less. It wasn't the teams themselves. They wanted to amalgamate everything so that it was easier for them to manage. So the way in which they did that, and I can't fault them for the entire process, they got the teams together and they tried to explain their situations and the boundaries of how they wanted everyone to organize, which I thought was really powerful and really good. And they asked the Scrum Masters to work with the teams to propose processes. So the way in which I did it, and I think a key takeaway for change, is without buy-in, you're going to get nowhere. And the managers realized that. They knew that change would only last as long, if they dictated it, the change would only last as long as they were sitting on the teams. And a Scrum Master isn't that person. A Scrum Master isn't sitting there. So they tasked the Scrum Masters to go away, work with the teams. And so I did something called £1,000 solution. We had been given some potential solutions by the management, and we also had come up with some ourselves. But I gave each team member $1,000, and said, right, you can spend that money on our potential solutions. You could put 500 in one of these. You could put £100 in separate ones. And it was a way of trying to find out where the team thought we should expend their effort, where their actual buy-in, I mean, we use the word buy-in, but actually giving them some fictitious money to spend and say, this is where I think we should focus. So I think it's about identifying baskets of improvements, finding out what the Scrum teams themselves want to improve rather than doing a top-down approach. That's when change management's effective. So to address the question you put to me about, how was I involved as a Scrum Master? And I was definitely involved. But did I do the change? No, I just guided it and helped it along and made us and the wider Scrum team see the value in what we were doing and helping them get that buy-in.
As I listen to this story, a couple of things come to mind. So first, there's a vision. We want to do something. And as you said, that vision came from management. And, all change comes from somewhere. Sometimes it comes from one team, but all other teams want to follow or don't. And sometimes it comes from the management. So there was a vision. We want something, some benefit, whatever that might be. And the process started by communicating that vision to the teams, right?
Yes, it started with transparency. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started with transparency. But you also mentioned something that I want to explore a little bit further. You said, but management realized that if the teams didn't have a say in what they were about to do, they wouldn't get buy-in. So how did you guys get there? How did the organization get to that level of understanding that, hey, we already brought the vision and we even have some ideas on how to do it, but we really can't push these ideas any further? How did you get there?
So the management had initially tried the very top-down approach because it was the quicker and easier option that they thought. They said, achieve this, and then they disappeared. First, basically got the teams to try and achieve something. But the problem was each team tried to implement in an independent fashion. It wasn't tied up. It wasn't scaled. And they realized that in order to get that change, there needed to be some effective facilitation. And that's when they got the Scrum Masters involved. So our suggestion was that we got everyone to an offsite everyone together. This was pre-COVID times. Physical space really helps when you're doing change. Okay. And that's not to knock virtual change, it's possible, but having someone there to have a face-to-face conversation and really give feedback to the managers about their current approach and how we should be going forwards. People listen more when you're face-to-face, in my experience, rather than just a quick 15-minute phone call. It's not just the time, but it's also the expressions on your face, the way in which we put our opinion across.
Absolutely. And actually, that's one of the things that we as Scrum Masters need to be aware of, right? That there's tools that are at some point the only ones we can use, like, virtual meetings as an example. But there are also other tools that, when possible, are much more effective. You mentioned the face-to-face conversation. I also like another aspect of this. When you get management and teams together discussing the same topic, management suddenly is no longer a stakeholder that is behind an email address. Management
Absolutely.
becomes a person or a set of people. And it is, of course, much more powerful to give feedback that way, but it's also much more possible to relate to that other person, right? And I think that maybe as you got started, management tried the top-down approach. That didn't work so well. Then, of course, getting in front of the teams and saying, hey, we tried this, it didn't work. Now we're working with the Scrum Masters to figure out what could work, right? And just opening that conversation transforms the whole process, because now it's no longer we are being told to do X. Now it is management has a vision, and they don't really know how to make it work, literally, because they tried it and they failed it.
Yeah.
And they're asking us, how can we make it work?
And that's just so much more empowering, isn't it? The way I like to think about it is, if I'm doing a job around the house and my wife says, Ryan, go and do that, I kind of think, maybe later. But if it's something that I'm bought into, if it's something I'm interested in, or I think of it myself, hey, 100% that's going to happen sooner, and it's going to happen with a better quality. And I think that's what management realized. The people closest to the problem are the ones that should solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. The people closest to the problem are the ones that should solve the problem. Or as David Marquet says, I forget the exact phrase, but it's something like, bring the decision power to the people who need to act immediately, rather than keeping the decision power away from the front line, if you will. Because, of course, there's many front lines, right? Management itself has a front line. It's just different from the team.
That's it. The people who you are expecting to adapt need to be the ones that are able to solve the problem. Adapting from a mile away is not going to help anyone, and it's not likely to be very effective.
And there's also another aspect. I don't know how much you guys discussed that in that process, but something that is very clear, we've referred to that already in this past few episodes, is this idea of context, right? Like, management has an understanding, they have a direction, and they have context, but it's their context. Yeah. And the team has their context, which is not the same as management. And what this means is that these two actors, teams and management, have different perspectives on what is happening, because they have different things they see, behaviors they observe, problems they face, right? And I think that also one of the powerful things of bringing these actors together is that you can start the process of collaboration. Now, it's not a guarantee that it will work, but because you start bringing different perspectives, right? Like, management sees a series of problems and the teams go like, I didn't think about that. Because literally, they probably didn't think about that because they're not exposed to it, right? And then the other way around, when teams say something and the management goes like, I didn't think about that. And now you start to create kind of a fertile ground for collaboration to emerge. Because at the end of the day, as Jason Little talks about in the Lean Change Management book, it is about co-creating change together, right?
Absolutely. And co-creation of change is powerful, it's meaningful, and hey, it's transparent. Yeah. If everyone's involved, everyone knows the situation, knows why we're changing, even though we might have multiple different drivers, depending on the person involved or the people involved, those reasons for change are in front and center. And we know what we've got to fix. And that's super powerful.
Absolutely. Great story. Thank you for sharing that, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role, we'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.